In the heart of a desolate mountain range, a young boy, alone with only his dog, stumbles upon a decaying cabin buried in the snow. The world has forgotten them, but the boy refuses to give up. What starts as an effort to survive the harsh winter turns into a journey that unearths a mystery buried deep within the cabin's walls. Before we dive into this incredible journey, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe that hope can be found even in the darkest places, make sure to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode is going to blow your mind. The bitter wind cut through Ethan's jacket like 1,000 icy knives as he trudged through the deep snow. His breath came out in clouds, mixing with the heavy flurry that swept over the mountains. Max, his golden retriever, trotted beside him, his fur already coated in a thick layer of snow. The dog's presence was the only comfort in this desolate wilderness, a constant reminder of the bond they shared since the world had become so quiet. For days, they had wandered, searching for shelter, trying to survive in the unforgiving cold. Ethan's fingers were numb, his face red from the wind, but he refused to stop. There was no choice. He couldn't turn back. Not now. The mountain air was thick with silence, save for the crunch of his boots against the snow. That's when he saw it, a silhouette against the endless white. It was a cabin, small and hunched, its roof sagging beneath the weight of the snow. The wood was dark, old, weathered by years of abandonment. The cabin seemed out of place in the vast wilderness, a forgotten relic from another time. Max barked, his tail wagging as he picked up his pace, sensing the promise of warmth. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A cabin could mean shelter, food, a chance to survive this brutal winter. "Come on, boy," Ethan muttered, his voice rough from the cold. They made their way toward the cabin, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the snow. When they reached the door, Ethan hesitated. The handle was covered in frost, but the faintest hint of warmth leaked out from under the door. It was strange. How could something this old still have warmth? His fingers tightened around the handle, and with a firm push, the door creaked open. Inside, the air was stale but warmer than the freezing world outside. Dust motes floated in the dim light filtering through cracks in the walls. The floorboards groaned under his weight, and a strange, musty smell hung in the air. Yet, there was something inviting about it, something that whispered a sense of safety in the midst of this cold, lonely place. Max padded inside, sniffing around, his tail held high. Ethan stepped in, closing the door behind him. As he glanced around, he noticed something odd. Despite the cabin's appearance of abandonment, there were signs of life. An old stove in the corner, a blanket draped over a chair, and a worn wooden table, its surface scratched and scarred. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Who had lived here, and why was it abandoned now? The questions lingered in his mind as he set down his pack and took a seat near the stove, trying to warm his frozen limbs. The crackling of the fire sounded like a comforting lullaby in the quiet room. Max curled up beside him, resting his head on Ethan's lap, as the boy stared into the flames. For the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself to relax, to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found a place to stay. But there was still that nagging feeling in the back of his mind. There was something about this cabin, something he couldn't quite place that made him feel uneasy, something felt off. As the fire crackled and the storm raged outside, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone in this cabin. There were secrets hidden in the walls, things waiting to be discovered, and soon, he would uncover them, whether he was ready or not. Ethan woke to the sound of Max's paws padding across the floor. The storm outside had intensified overnight, its howling winds rattling the windows, but inside the cabin, there was an eerie calm. The warmth from the fire had made the air inside feel almost comfortable, and for a moment, Ethan allowed himself to forget the world outside. His body, stiff from the cold and exhaustion, ached as he slowly sat up. Max was standing at the door to the back room, his ears perked, eyes focused. Ethan frowned. He hadn't noticed that door when they first entered. The room seemed hidden, tucked away in the back corner of the cabin. Curiosity pulled at him, and he stood, stretching stiffly before walking over to the door. Max's low growl sent a shiver down Ethan's spine as he reached for the handle. He hesitated. The dog wasn't one to growl unless something was wrong. With a quiet breath, Ethan opened the door, revealing a dark, narrow hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly into the cabin's depths. The air inside was cold and musty, far colder than the rest of the cabin. "Come on, boy." Ethan whispered, stepping forward. Max followed, his body low, still growling softly, eyes darting around. The hall led to a small room, its walls lined with old, dusty shelves. Books and papers were scattered everywhere, their yellowed pages curling with age. Ethan felt a strange pull, like this room held something important, something meant for him to find. As he moved deeper into the room, his foot hit something hard beneath the dust. He knelt, brushing off the dirt to reveal an old journal, its leather cover cracked with age. The spine was fragile, and as Ethan opened it, the pages inside were filled with neat, handwritten notes. His eyes scanned the first few pages, and the words immediately caught his attention. Experiment 347. Phase 1 complete. What the heck? Ethan muttered, flipping through more pages. The journal detailed strange, almost nonsensical experiments, references to something called the Robbling and the Reverence, Mountain's core, and a lot of science he didn't understand. But one thing was clear. Whoever had lived here had been obsessed with something that went beyond the ordinary. Max's growl broke through Ethan's focus. The dog was backing away, his fur bristling. Ethan felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut behind them, plunging the small space into darkness. Max barked wildly, and Ethan scrambled for the door, heart pounding. He tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. He tugged harder, panic rising. "Max, help me," he shouted. But the dog's barking was drowned out by the rising wind outside. Then, just as quickly as the door had slammed, it creaked open. Ethan pushed it open and rushed back into the main cabin, breathing heavily. Max followed closely, his tail low, ears flattened. They stood there for a moment, in the dim light of the fire, catching their breath. Ethan's hands were shaking as he held the journal, still unsure of what he had uncovered. But one thing was certain. This cabin was hiding something far darker than a simple shelter. The fire crackled and popped, but it offered little comfort as Ethan sat down on the cold wooden floor, the journal still in his hands. His mind raced with questions, but the one that stuck with him the most was, why was the room hidden? Max was quiet now, his body tense as he lay at Ethan's feet, his eyes never leaving the dark hallway that led to the secret room. The cabin seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't explain, an unsettling stillness that filled every corner. He had been alone with Max for so long that he had learned to trust his instincts, but they were screaming now. Ethan took a deep breath, determined to understand. The journal was filled with cryptic notes about the cabin and its owner, a man named Dr. William Green. Dr. Green had been a scientist, but his experiments, if they could even be called, that were nothing like what Ethan had learned about in school. There were mentions of things like energy manipulation, temporal disruption, and the extraction of ancient forces. None of it made sense, but the more he read, the more Ethan felt as if the answers were just out of reach. He turned the page, his eyes narrowing as he read something more personal. The last entry was different, less about experiments and more about something else. The mountain is more than just a place, it's a key. The cabin was built to protect it, and soon, I will unlock its power. I know they are coming for me, but they won't find me here. I have hidden it well. His hand trembled as he closed the journal. They? Who were they? And what was the key he mentioned? Max stood suddenly, his body rigid. His eyes were locked on the far wall, where a strange pattern in the wood caught Ethan's attention. It was a small, faintly etched symbol, almost hidden by the peeling paint. Ethan's heart raced as he approached it. The symbol seemed out of place, like it had been deliberately carved into the wood. Without thinking, he pressed against the symbol. A soft click echoed through the cabin, and to Ethan's shock, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Ethan's breath caught. The hidden room was more than just a secret compartment, it was a gateway. Max barked once, a warning, but Ethan's curiosity was overwhelming. The only thing louder than his fear was the voice inside his head, urging him forward. Find the truth. Find the key. With Max at his side, Ethan descended the stairs, unsure of what lay ahead, but certain of one thing. The mysteries of the cabin had only just begun to reveal themselves. The staircase led down into an underground chamber, cold and damp, with walls made of stone rather than wood. The faint glow of the fire above them was replaced by the musty darkness of the room. Ethan could hear his heartbeat in his ears as he stepped into the space, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. On the far wall, there were more symbols larger, more intricate than the one on the cabin door. They seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, glowing faintly in the darkness. But what caught Ethan's eye wasn't just the symbols. It was the desk. The desk was covered in dust, its surface cluttered with papers, blueprints, and strange artifacts that made Ethan feel as if he had stumbled upon something far older than he could imagine. In the center of the room was a large table, its surface cracked and worn. Max's growl echoed softly in the chamber. Ethan looked down at the dog, who was staring at something in the corner. At first, he thought it was just another pile of debris, but as he stepped closer, he realized it was a body. The figure lay crumpled on the floor, surrounded by scattered papers. Its skin had long since withered, the bones barely holding together. But in the faint light, Ethan could see that this was the body of Dr. William Green. The scientist, who had once lived in the cabin, had died here alone, surrounded by his research. Ethan crouched down beside him, his hands shaking as he flipped through the papers. The writing was frantic, the words growing more desperate as they went on. I must unlock the mountain's secrets. I must finish what I started. The power within. It calls to me. Ethan's stomach turned. He had thought this place was abandoned. But now, it seemed Dr. Green had never truly left. His work had consumed him, and now it seemed to have claimed his life. But there was one more thing, one final note written in the margins of a page, barely legible. If you find this, the key is in the cabin. The boy's heart pounded in his chest. The key wasn't just a metaphor. It was something real, something tied to the mountain itself. And whatever power Dr. Green had sought to control, it was far from gone. The wind outside picked up, howling as if to drown out the tension that had settled in the cabin. Ethan stood in the darkened chamber, surrounded by the remnants of Dr. Green's life. The words from the journal echoed in his mind. The key is in the cabin. But what did that mean? He felt Max brush against his leg, the dog's fur bristling. Ethan knelt to pet him, but Max was agitated, his body tense. There was something wrong, something in the air that Ethan couldn't explain. The cabin had always felt odd, but now it was as though the walls themselves were alive, watching him. The strange occurrences began subtly at first. Items would move, out of place when Ethan returned to a room. A tool on the workbench would be turned the other way, or the stack of papers on the desk would be shifted. It was as if the cabin had a mind of its own, reacting to their presence. One night, as Ethan sat by the fire, a soft noise came from the far end of the cabin. It was faint, but unmistakable, the sound of footsteps. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. Max's ears perked up, and the dog growled low in his throat. Ethan stood slowly, grabbing the flashlight he had found earlier. He moved cautiously toward the source of the sound, but when he reached the door to the hidden room, the noise stopped abruptly. The silence was deafening. Max stood at his side, his tail stiff, ears back. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. There was no one there. But the air had changed. It was thicker, heavier, as though the cabin had become something alive. Something was watching them. Ethan sat in the dimly lit room, his back against the cold stone wall. Max lay beside him, his eyes constantly scanning the room, his usual calm demeanor replaced by unease. The journal he had found in the hidden room lay open in his lap, the pages filled with disjointed notes about Dr. Green's experiments, and something darker, something more powerful than Ethan could comprehend. The scientist had been obsessed with a force that emanated from the mountain. It was something ancient, hidden beneath layers of earth and stone. The more Ethan read, the more it seemed like Dr. Green had stumbled upon something dangerous, something beyond human control. The references to the mountain's core were scattered throughout the journal, each entry more cryptic than the last. The cabin itself, Dr. Green had written, was built to protect this power, to shield it from the outside world. He had believed the mountain was a gateway to something greater, a source of unimaginable energy. The cabin had been his sanctuary, his research hub, a place to conduct his experiments far from prying eyes. Yet, the more he delved into the mountain's secrets, the more it seemed to consume him. Ethan's fingers trembled as he turned the page. The next entry made his breath catch. The energy within the mountain is awakening. The cabin was never just a shelter, it was a key. The power lies beneath, and it calls to me. I am close now. So close. But I fear I may not make it. If someone finds this journal, beware. Do not touch the key. The boy's heart raced. The cabin was never just a home. It had been built as part of a larger design, a mechanism to contain something powerful and ancient. The key Dr. Green mentioned, was it the symbol carved into the wall? Or was it something more literal, hidden within the cabin itself? Max stood up suddenly, ears twitching. Ethan's hand instinctively reached for the flashlight. He glanced around the room, his pulse quickening. The strange occurrences in the cabin had only grown more intense since he discovered the hidden room, but now, the air felt heavier, as though something was pushing against him. The walls seemed to hum, an almost imperceptible vibration, like a distant, low growl. Max let out a low whine, and Ethan could see the dog's body stiffen as he looked toward the far corner of the room. Ethan's eyes followed Max's gaze. But the corner was empty, just shadows, just the faint glow from the firelight playing against the cabin's walls. Still, the unease in his chest deepened. He could feel it now, the presence of something ancient, something powerful, and it was waiting. He stood up, the journal still in his hands, and made his way toward the back of the room, where the strange symbols from earlier were etched into the stone. As he drew closer, he could feel the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, their edges sharp and precise, as though they had been carved into the stone long before the cabin had been built. Max moved with him, his tail tucked low, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Ethan placed his hand on one of the symbols, and to his surprise, it felt warm, almost alive beneath his fingers. It pulsed once, and the room seemed to shift. The air around him grew colder, and for a moment, Ethan thought he could hear something, an echo of a voice, distant and indistinct. The floor beneath him creaked, and he stepped back, heart pounding in his chest. He had only just touched the symbol, but it felt like he had triggered something that had been waiting for years to be awakened. Ethan swallowed hard, feeling a cold sweat form at the back of his neck. Whatever Dr. Green had started, it was far from over. And now, it seemed that Ethan himself was caught in the middle of it. He could no longer ignore the signs. The cabin, the journal, the symbols, everything pointed to one thing. The mountain's power was real. But what would happen if he went deeper? What if the key was more than just a metaphor? What if the energy beneath the mountain wasn't something meant to be controlled? Max barked sharply, snapping Ethan out of his thoughts. The dog was backing away, eyes wide and fearful. Ethan's breath hitched as he followed Max's gaze. The shadows in the corner of the room had shifted. They were no longer just shadows. They were moving, swirling together, like tendrils of smoke. Something was coming. Ethan took a step back, his heart hammering in his chest. The room was alive with energy, with power, and it was growing stronger with every passing moment. Max growled again, a low, warning sound, as the swirling shadows reached toward them. The mountain had awakened, and with it, the secrets of the cabin. Ethan's heart raced as the shadows seemed to stretch toward him, their smoky tendrils growing darker, more defined with every passing second. Max barked fiercely, his fur bristling as he stood between Ethan and the swirling darkness. The dog was clearly as terrified as Ethan, but his protective instincts had kicked in. Ethan stumbled backward, his mind racing. What was happening? The symbols on the walls had come to life in some strange, terrifying way, reacting to the touch of his hand. The energy in the room was thick now, pulsating with a rhythmic force. It felt as though the cabin itself was alive, aware of their presence, reacting to the disturbance Ethan had caused by unlocking its secrets. Max was growling, his hackles raised. He was the first to move, charging toward the swirling shadows with a snarl. Ethan reached for him, calling out. But Max was too quick. The dog leaped toward the darkness, but as he did, the shadows recoiled, snapping back violently. "Max!" Ethan shouted in panic. He rushed forward, but just as his hand reached the dog, a wave of cold energy slammed into him. He was thrown back against the stone wall, his breath knocked from his chest as the force of the unseen power hit him. For a moment, everything went still. The shadows hung motionless in the air, like an ominous cloud frozen in time. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, groaning as he did. His body ached from the impact, and his head swam from the sudden, overwhelming force. Max was still by his side, his breathing labored, his tail tucked between his legs. The dog was frightened, but still there, Unwavering, Ethan looked at him, trying to steady his racing pulse. "Stay close, boy," Ethan whispered, his voice shaky. Max gave a low whine in response, and Ethan took a deep breath, trying to collect himself. He wasn't sure what to do next, but he knew they couldn't stay here. Whatever force was contained within the cabin, it was powerful and dangerous. The last thing he wanted was to provoke it further. As Ethan stepped back, his foot hit something hidden under the loose floorboards. He crouched down, lifting the board to reveal a small, weathered box. His fingers trembled as he pulled the box out, its edges cracked and worn with age. Max barked, a sudden burst of energy, but Ethan silenced him with a glance. With a deep breath, Ethan pried open the box. Inside, nestled in a bed of dust and old cloth, was a small, ornate key. Its design was intricate, shaped like a jagged mountain peak, with symbols engraved into the metal. It felt warm to the touch, as if it had been waiting for him all this time. Ethan's pulse quickened. This had to be the key, the one Dr. Green had mentioned in his journal. The key to what, though? The mountain's power? The cabin's secrets? Max growled again, louder this time, his body tense. Ethan could feel the temperature in the room drop suddenly, the cold air creeping around him like a warning. "Stay back, Max," he murmured, holding the key in both hands. The shadows had started to move again, swirling in the corners of the room as if aware of the key's presence. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow brighter, pulsing with an insistent rhythm, as if waiting for something to happen. Ethan could feel it now. The energy in the cabin was reaching a peak, the air humming with the intensity of it. The key in his hand seemed to resonate with the energy, and for a moment, Ethan was certain that he had just unlocked something far bigger than he could ever understand. He felt connected to the mountain, to the cabin, to the very earth beneath him. A low rumble echoed from deep within the ground, vibrating through the floorboards. The shadows shifted violently, and Ethan realized, with a sinking feeling in his stomach, that whatever was locked away in this cabin was stirring. He had only one choice now: to face what lay ahead, armed with the key, and find out what Dr. Green had uncovered and what he, Ethan, had just set in motion. The rumbling grew louder, a deep, resonating sound that seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere at once. The walls of the cabin shook, the floor creaking beneath Ethan's feet. He stood frozen, clutching the small key in his hand. Max was beside him, eyes wide, sensing the danger that was closing in on them. The air itself felt thick, heavy with anticipation, as though the cabin was holding its breath. Ethan's mind raced. The journal had warned him. The key is in the cabin. But this wasn't just any key. It felt as though it had a purpose, a power far beyond anything he could comprehend. He looked around, searching for some clue as to where this key should go. The symbols on the walls, the faint glow they emitted, seemed to pulse in time with the rumbling beneath the earth. The key, in his hand, felt like it was calling out to something, responding to the energy in the room. Without thinking, Ethan moved toward the back of the cabin, toward the secret compartment he had discovered earlier. The shadows were moving with him, swirling in the air, as if guiding him. He had no idea what would happen when he inserted the key, but he felt an undeniable compulsion to do so. The journal's warnings were clear. Do not touch the key, but how could he ignore it now? Max barked anxiously, but Ethan stepped forward, inserting the key into a small slot, hidden beneath one of the wooden panels. The moment it clicked into place, a blinding light filled the room, followed by a deafening sound that made Ethan's ears ring. The ground shook violently, and the walls of the cabin groaned. Under the strain, Ethan staggered back, shielding his eyes from the light. The air felt electrified, crackling with energy. Suddenly, the light dissipated, and the room was silent once more. Ethan blinked, adjusting to the darkness, but something had changed. The cabin had transformed. The once dilapidated walls now glowed with an otherworldly light. The symbols had become more distinct, more defined, as though they were alive. Max whimpered, his body low to the ground, as he slowly backed away. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. The past had been unlocked, and with it, the mountain's secrets. But as the dust settled, Ethan knew one thing for sure. They were no longer alone in this cabin. Something ancient and powerful had been awakened, and it would never let them leave the way they came. Ethan stood frozen in the center of the room, the key still gripped tightly in his hand. The once still cabin was now alive with energy crackling, pulsing, and vibrating as though the walls themselves were breathing. The symbols carved into the stone had begun to glow, their once dim outlines now sharp and vivid, like they were etched in fire. The air had thickened, as if the cabin were holding its breath, waiting for something. Max was at his side, his body tense, eyes darting around the room. The dog's usual calm demeanor had evaporated. The unease in his posture mirrored Ethan's own growing panic. Ethan looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening. He had expected some kind of revelation, but not this, a complete shift in the very fabric of the cabin. It felt like everything that had been dormant for centuries was now awakening, and they were caught in the middle of it. The rumbling from the mountain beneath them grew louder again, the vibrations shaking the walls. A soft hum filled the air, rising and falling like a distant song, ancient and haunting. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that this wasn't just a cabin, it was part of something far bigger. The entire mountain was a conduit for something else, something powerful. Max whined softly, his head low, looking toward the farthest corner of the room. Ethan followed the dog's gaze, his stomach tightening as he saw the shape in the shadows. At first, he thought it was just another trick of the light. But as his eyes adjusted, the shape became clearer, a figure, tall and thin, standing motionless in the corner of the room. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The figure was cloaked in shadow, its features indistinct, but there was a sense of something familiar about it, something deeply unsettling. It was as if the figure had always been here, part of the cabin, waiting for this moment. Before Ethan could react, the figure moved. Slowly, deliberately, it stepped forward into the glow of the symbols. The shadows seemed to cling to it like a shroud, but as it emerged fully from the darkness, Ethan could see what it was, an apparition, a ghostly figure of a man, wearing a tattered lab coat, his face twisted in an eternal grimace. The man's eyes were hollow, his skin pale and stretched tight over bones. Ethan recognized him instantly. It was Dr. William Green, the scientist whose journal had led him here, the man who had uncovered the mountain's secrets and whose obsession had led him to this horrific end. Ethan, the figure rasped, his voice a dry whisper that echoed through the room. The air seemed to thicken with the weight of the words. Ethan stepped back, his pulse hammering in his ears. "Dr. Green?" he whispered, unsure if he was hearing the ghost's voice or if it was just his imagination running wild. The figure nodded slowly, its hollow eyes fixed on Ethan. "You found the key. Now, you must understand." The world around Ethan seemed to tilt. He had come here seeking shelter, a way to survive, but now it was clear the cabin wasn't just a shelter. It was a prison, and the mountain was its jailer. The key had unlocked not just the cabin's doors, but something far more dangerous, something that Dr. Green had failed to control. The apparition moved closer, and the room seemed to darken, the glow from the symbols fading as the figure came into full view. "You've disturbed the balance, Doctor." Green's voice rasped again, filled with sorrow and regret. "The mountain. It was never meant to be awakened, and now it is hungry." Ethan's mind reeled as the words sank in. He had opened something. A door, a conduit, a power that had been sealed for a reason. Hungry for what? Ethan's voice cracked. "What do you want from me?" The figure's eyes seemed to narrow, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something human in them, a reflection of the man Green once was. "For you to finish what I started," the ghost whispered. Ethan stumbled back, his heart racing, a wave of fear washing over him. The room was now darker, the glowing symbols fading into shadows as if the very cabin was draining the light from the air. Max growled low in his throat, his body tense, but even the dog seemed uncertain, his hackles raised as if in warning. "Finish what you started?" Ethan echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you talking about?" The figure of Dr. Green stepped closer, its hollow eyes fixed on Ethan with a strange intensity. "I awoke the power, Ethan," Green rasped, his voice growing stronger, though still echoing with an eerie chill. "The mountain. It is not just a place, it is a living force, and I sought to harness it, to control it. But I failed. I failed because I did not understand the consequences." Ethan shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. The air around him felt suffocating, charged with something dark and dangerous. Max whimpered, sensing the tension, and Ethan reached down to calm him, but his hands were shaking. What are you asking me to do? Ethan finally managed to ask, his voice trembling. The ghost of Dr. Green seemed to pause, his expression unreadable. Then, as if accepting some unspoken truth, he spoke again, the words carrying an almost mournful weight. You must choose, Ethan. You can leave now. Walk away. You and your dog can leave, and this place will remain as it is a forgotten ruin. Or, you can stay. You can take control of the mountain's power. But be warned, the consequences are far greater than you can imagine. The room grew colder, the ground beneath Ethan's feet trembling as if the mountain itself was reacting to Green's words. Ethan's mind raced. How could he possibly understand the full implications of what Green was offering or warning him about? Stay? Ethan repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. Why would I stay? What's here that I could possibly want? The ghost of Dr. Green took a step back, his eyes still locked on Ethan. Power, boy. Power beyond anything you've ever known. The power of the mountain. The choice is yours. But remember, once you accept it, there's no going back. You will never be the same. The silence in the cabin deepened, and for a long moment, Ethan just stared at the figure before him, his mind spinning. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something much larger, something that could change everything. Ethan glanced down at Max, his dog who had been with him through everything, and felt a deep, familiar connection. The choice before him wasn't just about the cabin or the mountain's power, it was about the future. His future. Maybe, Ethan whispered to the ghost, his voice steadying with newfound resolve. Maybe it's not about power after all. With a final, resolute breath, Ethan stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and the apparition. I'm not here to control anything, he said, looking Dr. Green directly in the eyes. I'm here to end it, to stop what you started. The ghost's eyes widened, the sorrow and regret deepening. But then, as the room began to vibrate with energy once more, Dr. Green's form began to flicker, slowly disappearing into the shadows. I failed then, the ghost murmured as it faded away. But you may just succeed. The light in the cabin began to pulse again, brighter this time, stronger, as if acknowledging Ethan's decision. The mountain's hunger was still there, but for the first time, Ethan felt ready to face it. The beginning of the end had just begun, but for Ethan, it was a new beginning, one where he controlled his destiny. And this time, he would not let the mountain win.